A tradition that dates back hundreds of years might be the answer for singles with little luck in finding their soulmate. The film The Namesake provides a glimpse of what an arranged marriage meeting might look like, arrangements that happen far more often than many people realize. And joining me from Ohio is a couple who supports the concept of arranged marriages. Doctors Rita Kothari and Deepak Sarma discovered love in a way some might consider non-traditional. Hi there, Deepak and Rita.
Hey. Oh, hi. How's it going?
It's so good to talk to you. I'm going to come back to you in just a moment. I just want to introduce one other guest to this conversation. Also with us is Reva Seth. She is the author of First Comes Marriage, Modern Relationship Advice from the Wisdom of Arranged Marriages. Oh, Reva, do I have questions for you? And of course, Deepak Chopra joining us again this afternoon. Rita and Deepak, let me start with you, though. Your marriage is what some would consider semi-arranged. Explain to me how your courtship evolved and resulted in marriage.
Okay. We met in Cleveland. I had been living in Cleveland for many years after going to school in Kansas City. And I had met Deepak, and Deepak was very much interested in dating. And I said, "You're going to meet my parents first."
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So in order to just date, he had to meet your parents first before you'd even go out on a date with them?
Yes. I have to say, our first conversation was nearly 3 hours long. He was giving a talk in downtown at the Sheraton for a conference. I happened to meet him afterwards, and we ended up talking and talking. We took it to the lobby and kept talking, and I realized there was real potential.
Right. So Deepak, I understand that you were married before in what Reva calls a love marriage, meaning that you didn't ask for your parents' permission. And that didn't work out so well for you. So you were on board with really having both of your families kind of make the decision for you?
You bet. So that love marriage really turned out to be a hate marriage.
Oh.
And so once I had the divorce, I realized that I really didn't have much of a clue, and it would probably be a good idea to involve my parents in this whole process, because clearly the mistakes that I made in my first marriage, my parents had warned me about, and I just hadn't listened to them. So love turned to hate.
Well, I'm curious about your arrangement, because you guys met and you sort of hit it off, and then you took it to the parents to decide. So if your parents had said, "Hey, I don't think this is the best match," would you have kept dating, or would you continue to see each other and be interested?
Well, I think that what we would have done is that we would have probably asked them why and asked them to justify it or to explain it, and then we might have pursued kind of argument styles to show that they were wrong. But in our case, we didn't have that kind of scenario. There were different challenges. I mean, if I could just say, there were different challenges that Rita's father, for example, posed to me and posed to her and said, "Here's such a scenario that Deepak has. Can you address this? And only after you address this will I approve it." So in a way, he tested us.
My dad was not very happy to begin with. It was my parents. It was my dad that was really kind of unhappy with the whole idea. He had this notion that this person would be very, very much, someone that he had thought would be from North India, a Hindi speaker, who was Jain at that, and
so they had their expectations as well. I want to bring Reva Smith into the conversation. The name of your book is First Comes Marriage, Modern Relationship Advice from the Wisdom of Arranged Marriages. Reva, it sounds like what Deepak and Rita did actually goes a little bit further than what you're recommending or you're talking about, which is a true arranged marriage. There isn't any meeting of the potential bride and groom. It's all handled by the parents.
Yes and no. I don't actually advocate to have an arranged marriage, because I think I myself didn't have an arranged marriage, and it's a very culturally specific thing to do. What the book does is I've interviewed over 300 couples who had arranged marriages, and it takes the arranged marriage approach and says, what can we, in the way we date and approach our romantic lives, actually learn from arranged marriages. So for me, it's a bit of a different take, and it's a very personal book because I grew up in a small town just outside of New Jersey where I was pretty much the only non-white girl there, and my parents had an arranged marriage. And it was something I always wondered about, and it seemed very strange and exotic to me, but it really seemed to work, especially when a lot of my friends' parents were getting divorced by junior year. I started thinking, maybe, like, are my parents actually happy? Is there more to this than I ever thought? And so that's what led to the book, but I don't actually advocate having an arranged marriage for people not from the culture, because I think it is a difficult one to transition, but I certainly think there's a lot we can learn from how they approach relationships.
And Deepak Chopra, you and your wife, an arranged marriage, correct?
Not really. I mean, I was an intern at the medical school where I was, and she was visiting a patient of mine. And so I used to make excuses to go to see the patient. But of course, we found out that our parents were friends and they loved the idea.
Oh, okay.
That worked out.
So you kind of get around it.
Yeah. But I have a different take on this. I think that in a sense, every marriage is arranged because when you set up your friend for a blind date, you're arranging it, right? And so in the traditional cultures, the marriages were not just between two people, they were between two families or two tribes or two royal families, because then they maintained the socioeconomic status, the values that they shared, and there was safety in the arranged marriage because when you were in trouble, the whole family, two families were there to take care of you. Now, as we've moved into this area where they say love marriage, the arranged marriages are still about setting up. They don't force you, even in India or Africa. What they do is they set up a meeting between the boy and the girl based on their values and their socioeconomic status and their culture and their tastes. All of that is taken into account, and then you set up a meeting and you give the couple a chance to get to know each other. And it's not a forced situation at all. It's not love. It's not love at first sight, which really isn't love, because love is something that blossoms slowly and grows and evolves. What people call love at first sight is infatuation at first sight, which leads to a relationship which lasts about as long as a video program on YouTube.
Demetria, given that your book is the go-to girl for advice for living your best single life, I've got to get your take on this. What are you thinking when you hear of this idea of arranged marriage or semi-arranged?
So I've had some pretty bad hookups. My mother did one of them. There was an interesting story we did for Essence once where my mother, my boss, and my best friend hooked me up with people. Now, to my mother's credit, she hooked me up with someone who was very attractive. He was about 10 years older than me, which I thought was interesting. But he was very settled, and he was definitely ready to get married. Our love connection didn't necessarily work, but he was engaged 8 months later. Like, he was definitely looking
ready
for a wife, and my mother spotted that. So I thought that was good, but just in terms of our dispositions and how we would get along, I've got some energy. I'm fun, and he was a little dry for me. So I don't know if I would trust Mom on that one. But I do think the idea of letting people who know you very well, who have your best interest at heart, not just, safe and whatever. I do think it's interesting, and it makes for a fun date. And again, because you've got, people who, know each other on both ends, and your friends and family know one another, there's an extra incentive to kind of be on your best behavior and get things right. Nobody wants to deal with the consequences of, families and friendships and social circles and such.
Sure. Deepak and Rita, when you tell your friends and people that are outside of your culture, people that aren't really aware of this idea of arranged marriage or semi-arranged or love marriage or what have you, what is their response to you telling them about involving your parents and helping you make that decision to eventually marry one another?
Well, the people that knew me and my ex-wife were all for it.
Sounds like that worked for you. What about you, Rita?
I do get some quizzical looks. Here, you're dating long term, you're living with your significant other, until those kinds of decisions are made, assuming that they marry at all. So yeah, I do get I do get questions. I mean, when we do talk about the fact that we were semi-arranged and that our parents were involved from the get-go, they question it.
Reva, I understand that for your book that you interviewed more than 300 women who were part of arranged marriages. What were some of the central themes that they told you about being in such a relationship?
There were several. I was surprised at how confident and happy. Again, I have to preface, I came into doing these interviews not sure what I would find. And I always add that happy women wanted to talk to me, but there was a real sense of greater security at the level of commitment that I found in these relationships, which really impressive to me. It was really interesting. Like, I learned a great deal that I then brought to my own personal and dating perspective from listening to the stories of these women. And one of them was the idea that, growing up the way we do with rom-coms and the idea that love solves all, there was such a pragmatic approach to marriage, which doesn't sound romantic, but it seems like it really makes marriage into the big decision it really is. I think of my friends and even myself before I did this, and I think I put more thought into choosing a college than I did into the dates I went on, which could have led to the man I eventually married. And one of the things I say we can take from the arranged marriage approach is that they're not afraid to say what they really want in a relationship. A lot of the women I spoke to tell me that in the process, the first step was that they sat down, often with their family, and made a list that these were their marriage musts. They needed to have a man who, say, had a certain level of education, or who had a religious background, or valued spirituality. And that impressed me because I think that's very difficult to do in our culture, to just openly say before you go into anything that this is what I value and this is what I really want in terms of a relationship, versus just being spontaneous and seeing what comes your way.
Well, Reva Seth, thank you so much for certainly opening my eyes to this concept. Reva Seth joining us from Toronto, Canada, the author of the book, First Comes Marriage, Modern Relationship Advice from the Wisdom of Arranged Marriages. And also Deepak Sarma and Rita Kothari joining us via Skype from Cleveland, Ohio. Thank you as well for joining us today. You two look very, very happy in love, and I certainly wish you continued success. Aww. Oh, how sweet. Not a dry eye in the studio. Thanks again. And Deepak Chopra, thank you so much. And I understand that you will come back and visit us here on Our Take? All right, wonderful. I just put you under the spotlight, didn't I? And Demetria Lucas, thank you as well. It was good. The hour goes by quickly, doesn't it?
It goes by so fast. It was so quick. I'm like, oh my gosh, we're almost done.
I know. Well, that means you're going to have to come back as
I will definitely come back.
All right. I'm Christina Brown, and you're watching Our Take.